It's Bob Brown. Welcome to my Facebook YouTube channel. Sorry, I'm not the best YouTuber, but so I'm doing a series on negaholics and psychopaths, and I blew that video up. I'm gonna re-record it. But so we're gonna kind of walk through the progression of the destruction of democracy, the militarization of the West, the destruction of Islam, the radicalization of Islam, the capture of the populace in the Middle East by psychopaths, and the bleak outlook of Robert Heinlein's future of the failure of democracy and a world caught in endless war. So let's go through this series here on from the movie Starship Trooper. If you've never read the book Starship Troopers by Robert Heinlein, you should. Heinlein is basically a dystopian, in my opinion, science fiction writer, but he was also a very accurate predictor of the future. So let's go through a time series here on, and this kind of sums up Heinlein's philosophy of what's happening. So get this rolling here. Sorry.
Rico! Rico!
Pay attention. Pay attention.
Time is transacted. Time is transacted.
Let's sum up. Let's sum up. This year we explored the failure of democracy. While the social scientists brought our world to the brink of chaos. We talked about the veterans. How they took. You know these facts. But have I taught you anything of value this year? You. Why are only citizens allowed to vote?
It's a reward. What the Federation gives you for doing federal service.
No. Something given has no value. But when you vote, you are exercising political authority. You're using force. And force, my friends, is violence. The supreme authority from which all other authority is derived.
Now, that's an interesting commentary there. So, violence is the supreme force from which all other authority is derived. Now, let's face it, that's kind of the world you're in. I mean, the United States, we have the most powerful military in the world, and we can use it. We can strike at will across the planet, and we can destroy anybody we choose. So, the violation when we invaded Iraq from the stance that as a democracy we will only act in self-defense, that we will proactively attack if we think that an imminent threat exists, even though, as we know from the CIA's faulty documents in the invasion of Iraq, that there was no threat against Iraq. That was a watershed moment in American history. It was a watershed moment in Earth's history, where we decided that we would decide if someone was a threat. Now, that threat could constitute, you know, a philosophical threat, an organizational threat, a business threat. You know, Barack Obama always talked about an existential threat, and the existential threat that threatens our existence. But that's a very murky term, so keep that in mind.
My mother always said violence never solves anything.
Really? I wonder what the city fathers of Hiroshima would say about that. You.
They probably wouldn't say anything. Hiroshima was destroyed.
Correct. Naked force has resolved more issues throughout history than any other factor. The contrary opinion, that violence never solves anything, is wishful thinking at its worst. People who forget that always pay. Rico, what's the moral difference, if any, between a civilian and a citizen?
A citizen accepts personal responsibility for the safety of the body politic, defending it with his life. A civilian does not.
The exact words of the text. But do you understand it? Do you believe it?
I don't know.
Of course you don't. I doubt anyone here would recognize civic virtue if it reached up and bit you in the ass.
So there you have, that's kind of Heinlein's concept, is that unless you're a military veteran, I'm not a military veteran, my father was. My father was a combat Marine, and he also was in the Army and the National Guard. He spent almost 50 years, if not, in fact, 50 years of his life in the military. My father was kind of a contradiction. He was an enigma in his own way. He never owned a firearm at home. He never owned a gun. He deplored violence. He thought that really the military should be as a giant deterrent. In some ways, he mirrors the Trump philosophy of being so powerful and large that any attempt to go against the United States would be futile. So there is a parallel there, but he's not here to speak for himself, so I don't want to put words into his mouth that he may not agree with. But in Heinlein's philosophy, we see that, and you can even see in these side videos here, it's very fascist, very Nazi, 1930s, 1940s Nazi Germany look, costumes they had for the movie Starship Troopers. And it's a very fascist state. It's a very, a state of where the only people who can vote are military or veterans, and then there's everywhere else, because the rule of force is everything. So we kind of, like I said, we crossed the Rubicon when we went to into Iraq. We blundered into Iraq. So let's switch to another scene here, if I can get to it here properly. Sorry. So this is the Datu drop scene from Starship Troopers. Kind of mirror imaging, the invasions of Iraq. So you wonder, did the filmmakers, what was in their mind? Were they trying to mimic what was going on? Is a bug a metaphor? Is a metaphor for jihadists? So kind of like my dad always warned that in military operations, from his point of view, you can smash with high artillery, but in the end, like Heinlein, he believed that it's the ever-loving infantry that has to take and hold the ground, and that's something we still haven't quite got, even with our obsession with drone technology. That at the end of the day, if you're going to hold that territory, a human being has got to have boots on the ground to stop it. You just can't really remote control things as much as you think. Now, in the scene where we saw how democracy fails, this is how it dovetails in with negaholicism, because once the negativity is in mind, and I keep telling everyone I'm a self-described negaholic, I actually have a brain malformation called a Cherry 1 brain malformation, and I have some other issues I'm dealing with, and I'm going to do videos. You understand the programming that's going on, the negaholics. When you become addicted to negative thinking, grabbed a hold of by psychopaths. And my other video I have to redo, and I apologize for the faulty quality there. That's the essence of it, right? That if you're negative, if you're depressed, if you're downtrodden, you're going to let the psychopath can grab a hold of you, and next thing you know, you're doing things you never dreamt you would do. This is like a Normandy D-Day invasion of this alien planet.
Plug batteries. According to military intelligence, it'll be ran from light.
And this scene, they're showing that women can be capable commanders, which women can be capable commanders. I have no problem with that.
Steady as she goes, number 2.
This is kind of Heinlein's future of war, of warriors, the end of democracy, a military-controlled state. Now, the thing is this a metaphor for the invasion of Iraq, or the bugs, the Islamists, the Saddam forces? I have a feeling it is. And then when you have that dehumanization, so this movie in Heinlein's book, Starship Trooper, is all about human beings versus alien bugs. Is that a metaphor for the militarist state versus the counter state? And they're not, we dehumanize them, that they're just bugs to be squashed? There's a scene in here where these kids are all stomping bugs. That's the programming of the dehumanization of another side of a human force. But as we'll see here shortly, the only way to really hold enemy territory, and I agree with this, not in principle, but tactically, as my dad said, the infantry, the Marines, the Army has to hold the territory. As much technology as you throw at it, something we haven't learned in the West. As much technology as you throw at it, it's going to be the ever-loving infantry that has to hold it. This is true in business too. You have to have boots on the ground if you want to have your franchises out there. You have to have boots on the ground to hold that business market territory. But the problem is when the free market breaks down, and we have a free market breakdown, then you have conflict. The free market, you have to have a business-customer relationship, and you have to treat your customer good. When you despise free markets and you despise capitalism, you become basically a force that has to invade and take over. And that's what we're seeing. We're seeing the decline of democracy, the increase of a global fascist state, and we're seeing the destruction of relationships based on mutual respect and dignity. That's the fear, isn't it? We're going to start nuking each other. So that was just an expose of Heinlein's philosophy. Robert Heinlein is a very controversial science fiction writer, and he's actually a very good science fiction writer. His Stranger in a Strange Land is a book that that anyone interested in American literature should be aware of. Stranger in a Strange Land is a very big political, social satire, not a comedy, it's a social satire criticism of Western civilization and the flaws and threats that were overtaking us. I think Heinlein rightly predicted the decline of democracy, the rise of a militarized state. This is what General Eisenhower warned us against, the rise of the military-industrial complex. And we've seen this ad nauseum in the neocons that have started really since the first Bush administration through the Clinton administration. Definitely in the second Bush administration it came in, but it also was there in Barack Obama's administration. It would have been there as much in Hillary Clinton's administration. And now with Donald Trump, we see yet again another counterinsurgency taking place in Iraq against ISIS. All this was unnecessary. So this is the warning, and I really couldn't tell you if Heinlein was warning us or he was saying this was a predictable outcome of the decline of democracy and that we would actually be in a much more stable state under a military control. And in a way, if you look at what we overthrew in Iraq, that's exactly what Saddam Hussein had. He had a militarized state where he had absolute authority, and that he had absolute authority over the people in that country. When we broke that apart, we basically allowed hundreds of warlords to take over until they, and eventually they solidified into a group. One group solidified into ISIS, a vicious killing machine, the likes the world hasn't seen since the Middle Ages and the Second World War and the Nazis. So this is a commentary on Heinlein's work on what's happened. But my warning here at the end is that if you become a negaholic, if you listen to all the propaganda from CNN or Al Jazeera or Al-Qaeda's magazine or ISIS magazine, if that leaches into your brain, you're going to be easy prey for psychopaths. And that's what's happened in the Middle East a lot. So I wanted to introduce this connection of Heinlein's militarization, the de-democratization of the West, the militarization of the West, the aggressive warmongering of the West, and how that has caused Islam to go into a state of distortion that we are now seeing with these terrorist attacks. And as I said in my other video, we have got to get to a centrist point of view on both sides, stop fighting with Islam, start trading, partnering, bring the free market between both sides together, get the psychopaths out of this, get the negativity out of our own minds as business people, and start building trade alliances, business alliances, social economic alliances that mutually benefit both sides. Not this dystopian social welfare warmongering state that we're in. It's been Bob Brown as always. Keep studying.